So there was a couple things in this lawsuit that was updated, right? There was a thing that was updated with UMG and Drake. Apparently, Drake's lawyers are trying to push back against UMG. They're trying to say all these things about a motion to stay, motion to dismiss. And I wanted to break down the things that they're trying to argue back against UMG because UMG is trying to dismiss this case, and they're still trying to get the discovery, and UMG is just trying to dismiss it without giving them anything, right? So I wanted to break this down and show you the pushback that the lawyer is giving and how it's going to make everything a lot more harder for them and cause a lot more issues and open up a lot more can of worms in the near future. So let me take you to the page here where they just started talking to the lawyer, where the lawyer started talking to the judge. Right here, Drake's lawyers are trying to say that UMG had failed to make a strong showing that the plaintiff's claims are unmeritorious. On the motion to stay discovery, the defendant must make a strong showing that plaintiff's claims are so meritless as to warrant a stay. Courts have looked to whether the complaint is facially without merit. For example, a motion to stay was appropriate where the defendant's motion to dismiss was directed to federal court jurisdiction, whereas jurisdiction could be determined readily from the face of the complaint, and where the plaintiff was unable to cite any relevant authority in support of the existence of jurisdiction. Right here on the second page is what matters. UMG claims it need only show motion to dismiss is not unfounded in law. Motion to stay at 2. However, the balance of authority endorses a significantly higher standard. UMG has failed to meet its burden. The motion to stay, like the motion to dismiss, ignores the vast majority of plaintiffs' well-pled factual allegations in the 237 paragraph complaint. UMG's headline argument is that the defamatory material is non-actionable opinion that no reasonable person would understand as a statement of fact. Motion to dismiss at 11. This argument is doomed to fail and is nowhere close to establishing the plaintiff's defamation claim is facially without merit. For one, UMG completely ignores the complaint's allegation that millions of people all over the world did understand the defamatory material as a factual assertion that plaintiff is a PDF file. UMG also ignores allegations that the statements in question and surrounding context implied that these allegations were based on undisclosed evidence, and the audience understood as much. Indeed, UMG effectively concedes that it has no hope of defeating the sufficiency of the complaint via its attempt to substitute pleadings with its own factual narrative contained within a request for judicial notice of 26 exhibits. UMG improperly asked the court to accept many of these exhibits for the truth of the matters asserted, therefore, therein, motion to dismiss at 17, relying on news articles for the truth of statements made about the consented meaning of lyrics. At 16, offering UMG's interpretation of the meaning of lyrics from another exhibit. None of this appropriate at motion to dismiss stage. So real quick, just to pause, I wanted to break down this paragraph right here because this is important, because they're talking about how the argument that UMG tried to make was that the defamatory material is non-actionable opinion that no reasonable person would understand as a statement of fact. Everybody knows it's a rap beef. Because it's a rap beef, obviously nobody's going to take this serious. And the hyperbole and opinions that Kendrick Lamar and Drake are saying about each other, this is rap battle, this is rap beef. Everybody knows they're beefing. They know that this happens in rap battle. This is something that's done out of entertainment. Drake and his lawyer arguing this is just anti-hip hop within itself. But not only that, they say that the argument is doomed to fail and is nowhere close to establishing that plaintiff's defamation claim is facially without merit. When they say that UMG is trying to ignore the complaint's allegations that millions of people all over the world did understand this as defamatory material as a factual assertion that plaintiff is a PDF file, right here they're trying to argue that people believed it. UMG also ignores allegations that the statements in question, all surrounding the context, implied that allegations were based on undisclosed evidence and the audience understood as much. Indeed, UMG effectively concedes that it has no hope of defeating the sufficiency of the complaint via its attempt to substitute the pleadings with its own factual narrative contained within the request of judicial notice of 26 exhibits. Was that the statements in question implied that the allegations were based on undisclosed evidence and the audience understood as much. This part that Drake's team is trying to argue is going to get tricky because this is ignoring allegations of fact. The complaint asserts that the statements made about the plaintiff were understood by the audience as factual assertions rather than opinion. The reference to the case that they use indicates that an opinion based on undisclosed facts can be defamatory if the audience interprets it as a factual statement. Drake's lawyer is trying to prove that UMG's failure to acknowledge this is crucial because if the statements were indeed seen as factual and supported by an undisclosed fact, they could be grounds for defamation. However, this is the reason why UMG had did what they did, and they put the footnote on page 16. On page 16, the footnote addressed how Drake had a relationship with Millie Bobby Brown when the latter was, you could read it right there, as well as the situation that he had on stage. You could read it right there. And also when they're referring to the background that Baca has, Baca Not Nice is a affiliate, an OVO affiliate of Drake's that Kendrick Lamar had referenced. Baca got a weird case. Why is he around? They highlighted those charges. They highlighted those cases that he was involved in. And the reason why they point out these specific things is very important to the argument that they have made in the first place. Because Drake's lawyers are trying to get at him this way, the thing that you have to understand is these are the things that you could actually say did occur. When Drake was on stage with that person, that was true. When Drake was texting Millie Bobby Brown, when he's her senior, that is true. Talking about Baca and his weird case, that is true. The reason why UMG decided to stick to these things is because if the public is believing what Kendrick Lamar is saying, UMG could go back over here and say, well, there's a reason why they believe what Kendrick is saying is true. Kendrick is voicing his opinion, but his opinion is based off things that happened in the past. It starts to become truth as a defense to defamation. Truth is an absolute defense to a defamation claim. If the statements made by the defendant happen to be true, they can't be considered defamatory, regardless of how damaging or harmful they are to the plaintiff's reputation. This means that if UMG's claims about the plaintiff are factually accurate and provable, the defamation claim would likely fail, even if the audience understood the statements to be factual assertions. So there's a reason why they had brought this up only. Another thing that I thought UMG could do was just stick to the fact that this was just an opinion-based sport. This was just hyperbole. This was just a rap battle. This isn't supposed to be taken serious. Going back to the paperwork right here, they quote page 16. They say, offering UMG's interpretation of the meaning of the lyrics from another exhibit, none of this is appropriate at the motion to dismiss stage. But I don't think the key part is the lyrics. I think the key part is the footnote. If UMG is claiming that the statements are true, they could argue that any implications in the statements are based on undisclosed but accurate facts. In that case, UMG could argue that the audience understood the statements as accurate and not defamatory. If the plaintiff can't prove that the statements are false, they may lose the defamation case because truth is a defense. As far as the context and how the audience interprets statements, it mentions that the audience understood the statements to be factual assertions. This is key. If the plaintiff can show that the statements were presented as facts, even if UMG believes they were merely opinions and interpretations, it could still give a rise to a defamation claim. But if UMG can show that the underlying facts are true and they made a fair statement based on those facts, the defamation claim could be harder to pursue successfully. So what happens if the statements are true? If it turns out that the plaintiff did what they are accused of, and the truth of the matter is backed up by evidence, then the defamation case would collapse because truth is a complete defense. UMG would simply need to prove that the statements were factually accurate. Public figures in actual malice. If the plaintiff is a public figure, they would also need to show that UMG acted with actual malice, meaning that UMG made the statements with knowledge that they were false or with reckless disregard for the truth. Even if the statements are true, if UMG made them in a defamatory way without regard for the truth, the plaintiff might still have a case. However, proving actual malice is a high bar. So my whole stance is this: what if Drake and his lawyers, they're trying to push back, they're trying to say, you're trying to say that this was opinion based, but everybody thinks this is true because you're bringing this up because of these lyrics. You're claiming that he told Kendrick Lamar to say it because of the Tupac AI telling him to say it. But the things that Kendrick Lamar is saying, they're trying to say that people think that this shit is true. What I'm saying, where it could get messy, is what if UMG is trying to say, yo, what Kendrick Lamar said was opinion based, it was hyperbole, it wasn't supposed to defame nobody, it was just something that happened in a rap battle, non actionable opinion, but there is things online that do back up what Kendrick Lamar is saying. And what if UMG tries to prove those things as the truth? And I think that's why UMG had showed this footnote before Drake's lawyer could give any type of pushback. I think they're still going to move with the opinion based argument that all of this was just a rap battle and everybody was in on it. But I think them pointing this out right here in the very beginning is to also back up that not only is Kendrick Lamar stating opinion, he's stating an opinion based off factual events. So it's not like Kendrick Lamar is just coming out and saying this out of nowhere. There's a chance that Kendrick is saying this. There's a chance during past events, factual events, of questionable behavior that is coming from Drake. And that could be the main possibility why Kendrick Lamar is bringing this up in the first place. And that's why I'm saying that it could get messy if they were to try to go this route, because then they would try to prove that what Kendrick Lamar is saying could be true. And for the most part, what Kendrick said was true. It was true what he said about Baca. It was true about how he was still around. Why is he still around? It was true that when he said that he had people on his payroll because Baca's on his payroll, and he is that. It was true about the Millie Bobby Brown relationship. You did have a relationship with Millie Bobby Brown. There was also the situation on stage, the situation that Drake had on stage. That was a factual event. That did occur. That did actually happen. So if UMG tries to argue this and tries to say, well, hey, this is true though. This did happen. And this is why Kendrick was saying that stuff. I feel like it could get messy. But I feel like UMG was smart and they had brought this up because they're going to argue that Kendrick Lamar's opinions were simply based off of factual events that had occurred during Drake's career. It would still hold the argument that whatever Kendrick was saying was opinion based with non-actionable opinions and hyperbole deemed in rap battle, but also conveying that what Kendrick said in opinion was based off of factual events. I feel like them doing that is UMG doubling down on what they said about Drake right here. And I think that's when it starts to become difficult for Drake in this argument. But I'm not sure how UMG is going to respond. I don't think that they're going to try to say that this is true, because when you try to prove something to be true, that's when you're giving into the defamation thing and stuff like that. But if they could prove that these are factual events, such as getting the video from Twitter or getting the clip of Millie Bobby Brown talking about that stuff, about her relationship with Drake, or pulling up Baka Not Nice's charges, proving that these are factual things that happened that Kendrick had talked about and Drake rebutted, I feel like it could go that route. I don't think it's a good idea for them to challenge it like this, because honestly, it's not going to end well. It's just going to end with UMG doubling down on the statement that they had made previously when they had cooked Drake the first time, or whatever counter argument they decide to make. But I think that's how they might move forward. That's just my educated guess on it. I didn't pass the bar exam. But as far as everything else, man, like when they talk about the other things, I think they had mentioned something about, I think they had started talking about the payola and paying like a podcast and all that stuff, which I'm not really too worried about, especially because this is ridiculous talking about payola when Drake is literally paying people to stream his music, pay to play rewards, paying people, marketers, to pay people to listen and react to Drake's music. This is why the payola argument is so ridiculous to me, because obviously Drake is still doing it for his latest album. So to take UMG to court over payola and defamation, the payola part is always silly to me. As well as UMG has been on notice of plaintiff's claims since July. So on July, 2 months after the battle, Drake decided to sue and wanted to get everybody's electronic data and information, which was another thing to point out. That Drake was suing right after the battle, 2 months right after, is hilarious. Still hilarious to this day. But I think the key part was on the second page right here. I don't think that it's a good idea to go against UMG this way. And I think this is where it might get tricky and it might double down on the things that they talked about. I don't think it's going to be a footnote the second time. I think it was a footnote the first time as a warning. I think it was intentionally put there as a footnote the second time, like as a warm up. I think if they were to come with a response, I feel like it's not going to be a footnote this time. I feel like it's going to be like a whole breakdown with links or with hyperlinks and like Baca's background and like charges and stuff like that. Like I feel like it could go that far. Let's say UMG is accused of defamation based on lyrics that are allegedly about the plaintiff. If UMG can prove that the lyrics are based on factual events, the plaintiff's defamation case will likely fail because truth is a defense. Even if the plaintiff claims that the statements cause harm, the truthless statement will defeat the claim. If UMG argues that the plaintiff's claims lack merit, they might be asserting that the case should be dismissed without discovery because the statements are true, and therefore there's no real defamation case. If the court agrees, the case could be dismissed before it even proceeds to the discovery phase because the plaintiff can't win defamation case if the statements are true. Even if the statements about the plaintiff are true, that does not hurt the complaint because the truth is complete defense to defamation. If the defendant, which is UMG, can show that the statements were truthful, the case is unlikely to succeed and the complaint would not proceed. This could lead to a motion to dismiss. So, in the end, I think that UMG is going to try to say that Kendrick was giving his opinion in a rap beef, which is full of hyperbole and non actionable opinions. I feel like they're going to say that it was based off an actual event, a factual event. And that's why he had said it in the first place. Also, quoting Drake in the Taylor Made freestyle, where he told him to say those things in Tupac's AI voice. If UMG actually doubled back and doubled down on those statements and tried to say that Kendrick only said this because you said it and because he saw events that happened with his own eyes, I think it would make the situation a lot more worse for Drake in the long run. Because then you'll have UMG publicly out here proving that the things that you did were not only wrong, but were also true. But I ain't passed the bar exam, bro. I'm just kind of thinking if Drake's lawyers responded this way, I could only imagine UMG's lawyers are cooking up something even crazier. And I think it's going to go back to the footnote that they had left. And I think they might double down on that. And this is where things get more tricky. But y'all tell me how you feel about this and get back to me, man. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video, man. Peace. Keep it a legend.